Today we have some more actual history about the Great Sioux Massacre in Minnesota in 1862, and the events preceding it. We will continue to read from this 1864 book by Charles S. Bryant and Abel B. Murch, titled, A History of the Great Massacre by the Sioux Indians in Minnesota, including the personal narratives of many who escaped. In this episode, we will hear about the aftermath of the 1857 massacre at Spirit Lake in Iowa by Inkpaduda's outlaw band of Sioux warriors. We will hear about how some of the Sioux warriors from other tribes were sent to punish Inkpaduda, and how that punishment, or lack thereof, was a cause of the 1862 outbreak. We will then hear from the Sioux Indian agent Major Thomas Galbraith about what he thinks were the major causes of the Sioux outbreak, including internal dissension between the farmer Indians who had tried to join the white man's civilization, and the blanket Indians who retained their nomadic way of life, but would demand food and other things from the farmer Indians. Then we will hear the story about how one man in the U.S. Army, Sergeant Jones, stationed at Fort Ridgely, likely forestalled the massacre by 1 week, because he did not trust the Indians when they approached the fort, armed and in large numbers, and asked to come inside and perform a dance. Sergeant Jones's vigilance likely saved the fort, and forced the Indians to develop a new plan, which they would enact 1 week later. So here's some more of the causes and events which led to the 1862 Sioux Massacre. The government had required of the Sioux the delivery of Inkpaduda and his band, as the condition for the payments of their annuities. This was regarded by certain of the bands as a great wrong, visited upon the innocent for the crimes of the guilty. One of their speakers, Mazakudi Mani, in a council held with the Sissetons and Wahpetons on August 10, 1857, at Yellow Medicine, said, "The soldiers have appointed me to speak for them. The men who killed the white people did not belong to us, and we did not expect to be called to account for the people of another band. We have always tried to do as our great father tells us. One of our young men brought in a captive woman. I went out and brought in the other. The soldiers came up here, and our men assisted to kill one of Inkpaduda's sons at this place. Then you, Superintendent Cullen, spoke about our soldiers going after the rest. White Lodge said he would go, and the rest of us followed. The lower Indians did not get up the war party for you. It was our Indians, the Wahpetons and Sissetons. The soldiers here say that they were told by you that $1,000 would be paid for killing each of the murderers. Our great father does not expect to do these things without money, and I suppose it is for that special agent Major Pritchett has come up. We, with the men who went out, want to be paid for what we have done. 3 men were killed, as we know. All of us want our money very much. We have never seen our great father, but we have heard a great deal from him, and have always tried to do as he has told us. A man of another band has done wrong, and we are to suffer for it. Our old women and children are hungry for this. I have seen $10,000 sent here to pay for our going out. I wish our soldiers were paid for it. I suppose our great father has more money than this." To a part of this, Superintendent Cullen replied as follows, "The money that man saw was the annuity monies. I never promised $1,000 a head, or any other sum. I have never made an offer for the head of any man. I was willing to pay $1,000 out of my own pocket to the Indians if they went and did as their great father desired. I know what I say, and will always do as I say. I put my words down when I go home." Major Pritchett, the special government agent, thought it necessary to answer other points made by Mazakudi Mani, and spoke in council as follows. "Your great father has sent me to see Superintendent Cullen, and to say to him he was well satisfied with his conduct, because he had acted according to his instructions. Your great father had heard that some of his white children had been cruelly and brutally murdered by some of the Sioux nation. The news was sent on the wings of the lightning, from the extreme north to the land of eternal summer, throughout which his children dwell. His young men wish to make war on the whole Sioux nation, and revenge the deaths of their brethren. But your great father is a just father, and wishes to treat all his children alike with justice. He wants no innocent man punished for the guilty. He punishes the guilty alone. He expected that those missionaries who have been here teaching you the laws of the Great Spirit had taught you this. Whenever a Sioux is injured by a white man, your great father will punish him, and expects from the chiefs and warriors of the Great Sioux Nation that they will punish those Indians who injure the whites. He considers the Sioux as part of his family, and as friends and brothers he expects them to do as the whites do to them. He knows that the Sioux Nation is divided into bands, but he knows also how they can all band together for common protection. He expects the nation to punish those murderers or deliver them up. He expects this because they are his friends. As long as these murderers remain unpunished, or not delivered up, they are not acting as friends of their great father. It is for this reason that he has withheld the annuity. He has instructed Superintendent Cullen, so as to say and so as to act. If you have determined not to punish them or deliver them up, your great father will send his own warriors to do so, and he wants no assistance from you. If your father, Superintendent Cullen, is satisfied that you will do nothing further, then the warriors of your great father will go out, and if the murderers do not hide in holes like foxes, your annuity will soon be paid. Your great father will have his white children protected, and all who have told you that your great father is not able to punish those who injure them will find themselves bitterly mistaken. Your great father desires to do good to all his children, and will do in all his power to accomplish it. But he is firmly resolved to punish all who do wrong. After this, another similar council of September 1st, 1857, was held with the Sisseton and Wahpeton bands of the Upper Sioux at Yellow Medicine. Agent Flandreau, in the meantime, had succeeded in organizing a band of warriors made up of all the annuity bands, 17 of the Upper and 8 of the Lower Sioux, under Little Crow. This expedition numbered altogether 106, besides 4 half-breeds. This party went out after Inkpaduda on the 22nd of July, 1857, starting from Yellow Medicine. On the 5th of August, Major Pritchett reported to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs that the party of Indians representing the entire Sioux Nation, under the nominal head of Little Crow, returned yesterday from the expedition in search of Inkpaduda and his band, after an absence of 13 days. As this outlaw, Inkpaduda, has achieved an immortality of infamy, it may be allowable in the historian to record the names of his followers. Inkpaduda, or Scarlet Point, heads the list, and the names of the 11 men are given by the wife of Tatayahe, who was killed by the party of Sioux under Little Crow. Thus the names are Shifting Wind, Roaring Cloud, son of Inkpaduda, killed at Yellow Medicine; Fire Cloud, twin brother of Machpeataman; Tawechehawakan, or his mysterious father, killed in the late expedition; Bahata, or Old Man; Ketchimon, or Putting on as he walks; Husan, or One Leg; Kahadat, or Rattling, son-in-law of Inkpaduda; Fedotanka, or Big Face; Tatelada Shink Shamani, or one who makes crooked wind as he walks; Tachanche Gahota, or his great gun; and the 2 boys, children of Inkpaduda, not named. These were formerly of the Wapekuda band. Some 20 years ago they killed the chief of that band, Tasagi, or his cane, in consequence of which they were expelled from the band, and have remained roving outlaws in the Missouri River, and in its vicinity until this time. Those who yet survive have the mark of Cain upon them. After this band had been pursued by Little Crow, into Lake Chowptayanka, or Big Drywood, distant 20 miles in a northwestern direction from Skunk Lake, and 3 of them killed outright, wounding 1, taking 2 women and a little child prisoners. The Indians argued that they had done sufficient to merit the payment of their annuities, and on the 18th of August, 1857, Major Cullen telegraphed the following to Honorable J.W. Denver, Commissioner of Indian Affairs. If the Department concurs, I am of the opinion that the Sioux of the Mississippi, having done all in their power to punish or surrender Inkpaduda and his band, their annuities may with propriety be paid, as a signal to the military movements from Fort Ridgely and Randall. The special agent from this department waits an answer to this dispatch at Dunlaeth, and for instructions in the premises. In this opinion, Major Pritchett in a letter of the same date concurred, for reasons therein stated and transmitted to the department. In this letter, among other things, the writer says, "No encouragement was given to them that such a request would be granted. It is the opinion, however, of Superintendent Cullen, the late agent Judge Flandreau, Governor Maderi, and the general intelligent sentiment that annuities may now with propriety be paid, without a violation of the spirit of the express determination of the department to withhold them until the murderers at Spirit Lake should be surrendered or punished. It is argued that the present friendly disposition of the Indians is manifest, and should not be endangered by subjecting them to the wants incident to their condition during the coming winter, and the consequent temptation to depredation, to which the withholding their money would leave them exposed. Notwithstanding, the Major yields this point for the reasons stated, yet he continues, "If not improper for me to express an opinion, I am satisfied that, without chastising the whole Sioux nation, it is impossible to enforce the surrender of Inkpaduda and the remainder of his band. Nothing less than the entire extirpation of Inkpaduda's murderous outlaws will satisfy the justice and dignity of the government, and vindicate outraged humanity." Here we leave the Inkpaduda massacre, remarking only that the government paid the Indians their annuities, and made no further effort to bring to condign punishment the remnant who had escaped alive from the pursuit of Little Crow and his soldiers. This was a great error on the part of our government. The Indians construed it either as an evidence of weakness, or that the whites were afraid to pursue the matter further, lest it might terminate in still more disastrous results to the infant settlements of the state, bordering upon the Indian country. The result was, the Indians became more insolent than ever before. Little Crow and his adherents had found capital out of which to foment future difficulties, in which the two races should become involved. He reasoned that if one outlawed Indian with 11 of his followers could massacre whole white settlements, and create a panic that should drive thousands from their homes, and thus for a time depopulate vast portions of the state, and escape unpunished, that by a concerted movement of the Sioux nation, numbering its warriors by thousands, the whole white population of the border countries could be massacred, and the other portions, by the panic that such a catastrophe would create, could by one grand effort be driven beyond the Mississippi. And it is now believed, and subsequent circumstances have greatly strengthened that belief, that Little Crow, from the time the government ceased its efforts to punish Inkpaduda, began to agitate his great scheme of driving the whites from the state of Minnesota, which finally culminated in the ever-to-be-remembered massacre of August A.D. 1862. The antecedent exciting causes of this massacre are numerous. Each individual who reflects superficially upon this great subject finds a cause sufficient to satisfy him in the conclusions to which he arrives. The displaced agents and traitors find the cause in the erroneous action of the government, resulting in their removal from office. The statesman and the philosopher may unite in tracing the cause to improper theories as to the mode of acquiring the right to Indian lands. The former may locate the evil in our system of treaties, and the latter in our theories of government. The philanthropist may find the cause in the absence of justice, which we exhibit in all our intercourse with the Indian races. The poet and the lovers of romance and human character find the true cause, as they believe, in the total absence of all appreciation of the noble, generous, confiding traits peculiar to the native Indian. The Christian teacher finds apologies for acts of Indian atrocities in the deficient systems of mental and moral culture. Each of these different classes are satisfied that the Great Massacre of August 1862 had its origin in some way intimately connected with his favorite theory. And were the question raised, what was the cause of the Great Southern Rebellion, the answers would be perhaps quite as various. The exciting cause, or that seized upon as an excuse for action, is frequently far removed from the cause itself. Major Thomas J. Galbraith, Sioux Indian agent, says, "There were, it is true, many immediate inciting causes, which will be alluded to and stated hereafter, but they are subsidiary to and developments of, or incident to, the great cause set forth. It may be said, and indeed it is true, that there is a wicked as well as a Christian civilization, that such civilization is only true civilization perverted, a counterfeit, a base coin, and that the recent Sioux outbreak would have happened at any rate as a result of a fair consequence of the cause here stated. I have no more doubt than I doubt that the existing great rebellion to overthrow our government would have occurred had Mr. Lincoln never been elected President of the United States. Now, as to the exciting or immediate causes of the outbreak, by my predecessor a new and radical system was inaugurated, Practically and in its inauguration, he was aided by the Christian missionaries and by the government. The treaties of 1858 were ostensibly made to carry this new system into effect. The theory in substance was to break up the community system which obtained among the Sioux, weaken and destroy their tribal relations, individualize them by giving each a separate home, and having them subsist by industry, the sweat of their brows, till the soil, to make labor honorable and idleness dishonorable, or as it was expressed in short, make white men of them, and have them adopt the habits and customs of the white men. This system once inaugurated, it is evident was at war with their ancient customs. To be clear, the habits and customs of white men are at war with the habits and customs of the Indians. The former are civilization, industry, thrift, economy. The latter, idleness, superstition, and barbarism. And I have already stated with what tenacity these Indians cling to their habits and customs. On the first day of June, 1861, when I entered upon the duties of my office, I found that the system had just been inaugurated. Some 100 families of the annuity Sioux had become novitiates, and their relatives and friends seemed to be favorably disposed to the new order of things. But I also found that against these were arrayed over 5,000 annuity Sioux, besides at least 3,000 Yanktonai, all inflamed by the most bitter, relentless, and devilish hostility. At the very outstart I thus found existing the war of the scalp-locks and blankets against the cut hair and breeches. The pantaloons importuned me to have them protected, and the blankets to go with them and break up the new system. I saw, to some extent, the difficulty of the situation, but I determined to continue, if in my power, the civilization system. To favor it, to aid and build it up by every fair means, I advised, encouraged, and assisted these farmer novitiates. In short, I sustained the policy inaugurated by my predecessor, and sustained and recommended by the government. I soon discovered that the system could not be successful without a sufficient force to protect the farmer from the hostility of the blanket Indians. In addition to the natural hostility of the wild Indian to the white man, I soon discovered that evilly disposed white men, and half-breeds in their interest, were engaged in keeping up this hostility and in fomenting discontent. I found that previous to my arrival, the Indians had been industriously told that on the arrival of the new agents, the Dutchmen, an opprobrious name for the farmer Indians, would be cleaned out, and that the blanket Indians would be restored to special favor, that the new agent would break up the new system, and restore the old order of things. This vile story had its effect. While the farmer Indians were satisfied with my course, the blanket Indians were disappointed, because as they said I did everything for the Dutchmen. Thus, in the start, an ill feeling was engendered. Although my partiality for the white party was looked upon with great jealousy, yet I kept on as best I could, from the commencement until the outbreak, in aiding the work of civilization. During my term and up to the time of the outbreak, about 175 Indian men had their hair cut, and had adopted the habits and customs of white men. For a time, indeed, my hopes were strong that civilization would soon be in the ascendant, but the increase of the civilization party, and their evident prosperity, only tended to exasperate the Indians of the ancient customs, and to widen the breach. Here then we had the hostile contending forces brought face to face, the farmer Indians, the governments, represented by the agents and employees, and missionaries on the one side, and the blanket Indians and those who deemed it their interest to take sides with them, and their priests, medicine men, and sorcerers on the other. The latter were for the ancient customs, the former for diametrically the opposite system. In this shape, the radical cause of the outbreak had been developing itself prior to the outbreak, from the day of its inauguration as a system, until it exploded in the outbreak itself. These immediate exciting causes, or rather offshoots, incidents, results, fruits of the great cause, are many. Indeed, their name is legion, and such as I can call into rank I shall enumerate. But while these are to be enumerated, it may be permitted me to hope that the radical cause will not be forgotten or overlooked. And I am bold to express this desire, because ever since the outbreak, the public journals of the country, religious and secular, have teemed with editorials by and communications from reliable individuals, politicians, philanthropists, philosophers, and hired penny-aligners. mostly mistaken, and sometimes willfully and grossly false, giving the cause of the Indian raid. Major Galbraith enumerates a variety of the other exciting causes of the massacre, which our limits will not allow us to insert in this volume. Among these causes he enumerates the stories told to the Indians, that their monies were detained by the agents for purposes of speculation, that white men had cheated the Indians out of large amounts of money, that the treaty stipulations had not been carried out in good faith by the government, that the United States was itself at war, and that Washington was taken by the slaves. All these several excitants among the Indians, the Major found to interrupt the harmony that otherwise might have prevailed, but none of these were, in his opinion, the cause of the outbreak. The Major then adds, grievances such as have been related, and numberless others akin to them, were spoken of, recited, and chanted at their councils, dances, and feasts, to such an extent that in their excitement, in June 1862, a secret organization known as a Soldiers' Lodge was formed by the young men and soldiers of the Lower Sioux, with the object, as far as I was able to learn through spies and informers, of preventing the traitors from going to the pay tables, as had been their custom. Since the outbreak I have become satisfied that the real object of this lodge was to adopt measures to clean out all the white people at the time of the payment, and deluge the fairest portions of the state in the blood of the white race. Whatever may have been the cause of the fearful and bloody tragedy, it is certain that the manner of the execution of the infernal deed was a deep-laid conspiracy, long cherished by Little Crow, taking form under the guise of the Soldiers' Lodge, and matured in secret Indian councils. In all these secret movements, Little Crow was the moving spirit. He was the counselor, orator, and acknowledged chief. Now the opportune moment seemed to have come. Only 30 soldiers were stationed at Fort Ridgely. Some 30 were all that Fort Ripley could muster, and at Fort Abercrombie 1 company under Captain Vanderhorck was all the whites could depend upon to repel any attack in that quarter. The whole effective force for the defense of the entire frontier, from Pembina to the Iowa line, did not exceed 200 men. The annuity money was daily expected, and no troops except about 100 men at Yellow Medicine had been detailed as usual to attend to the anticipated payments. Here was a glittering prize to be paraded before the minds of the excited Indians. The whites were weak. They were engaged in a terrible war among themselves. Their attention was now directed toward the great struggle in the South. At such a time, offering so many chances for rapine and plunder, it would be easy to unite at least all the annuity Indians in one common movement. Little Crow, fertile in expedients and strategy, knew full well that the Indians could easily be made to believe that now was a favorable time to make a grand attack upon the border settlements. No one could turn all these circumstances to better purpose than the astute, cunning, yet ever treacherous Little Crow. All this he knew. Should the golden opportunity pass by unimproved, Little Crow, in view of all the favorable auspices now concurring, called a famous Indian council, which was fully attended by the Soldiers' Lodge. This memorable council convened at Little Crow's village near the Lower Agency, it is believed on Sunday nights, precisely 2 weeks before the first massacres at Acton. Little Crow was the master spirit of this council, and molded all his deliberations, exactly suited to the execution of his long-cherished purpose, to expel the whites from the valley of the Minnesota. Before him was a select audience sworn to execute to the letter any and all decrees that might receive the sanction of its high authority. Here was a theme worthy of all the cunning of the fox, the wisdom of the serpent, the eloquence of an accredited orator, and the highest anticipations of the savage heart, thirsting for human blood. Little Crow was not found wanting in ability to meet the greatness of the occasion. The proceedings of this council, of course, were secret. Some of the results arrived at, however, have since come to the knowledge of the writer of these pages. The council matured the details of a conspiracy, which for atrocity had hitherto never found a place in recorded history, not excepting that of Campore. The evidence of that conspiracy comes to us in part from the relation of one who was present at the infamous council. Comparing the statement of the narrator with the known concurrences of the times, that council preceded the attack on the government stores at the Upper Agency, an account of which will be particularly detailed in another chapter. The council convened on Sunday nights. The attack on the Upper Agency took place on the next day, Monday the 4th of August. and on the same day an attempt was made to take Fort Ridgely by strategy. At this time, no suspicion of the whites was aroused. Not the slightest danger was anticipated. Only 30 soldiers occupied the post at Fort Ridgely, and this was deemed amply sufficient in time of peace. But we will not longer detain the reader from the denouement of this horrible plot. Our informant, than whom a more conscientiously truthful man lives not upon the earth, states the evidences of the decrees of the Council of the 3rd of August thus. I was looking toward the agency, and saw a large body of men coming toward the fort, and supposed them soldiers returning from the payment at Yellow Medicine. On a second look, I observed that they were mounted. Not knowing at this time that they must be Indians, was surprised at seeing so large a body, as they were not expected. I resolved to go into the garrison to see what it meant, having at the time not the least suspicion that the Indians intended any hostile demonstration. When I arrived at the garrison, I found Sergeant Jones at the entrance, with a mounted howitzer, charged with shell and canister shot, pointed toward the Indians, who were removed but a short distance from the guardhouse. I inquired of the sergeant what it meant, whether any danger was apprehended. He replied indifferently, no, but that he thought it a good rule to observe, that a soldier should always be ready for any emergency. These Indians had requested the privilege to dance in the enclosure surrounding the fort. On this occasion that request was refused them, but I saw that about 60 yards west of the guardhouse, the Indians were making the necessary preparations for a dance. I thought nothing of it, as they had frequently done the same thing, but a little further removed from the fort, under somewhat different circumstances. I considered it a singular expedition of Indian foolishness, and at the solicitation of a few ladies, went out and was myself a spectator of the dance. When the dance was concluded, the Indians sought and obtained permission to encamp on some rising ground about a quarter of a mile west of the garrison. To this ground they soon repaired, and encamped for the night. The next morning by 10 o'clock, all had left the vicinity of the garrison, departing in the direction of the lower agency. This whole matter of the dance was so conducted as to lead most, if not all, the residents in the garrison to believe that the Indians had paid them that visit for the purpose of dancing and obtaining provisions for a feast. Some things were observable that were unusual. The visitors were all warriors, 96 in number, all in undress except a very few who wore calico shirts, and in addition to this, they all carried arms, guns, and tomahawks, with ammunition pouches suspended around their shoulders. Previous to the dance, the war implements were deposited some 200 yards distant, where they had left their ponies, but even this circumstance, so far as it was then known, excited no suspicion of danger or hostilities in the minds of the residents of the garrison. These residents were 35 men, 30 soldiers, and 5 citizens, with a few women and children. The guard that day consisted of 3 soldiers. One was walking leisurely to and fro in front of the guardhouse. The other 2 were off duty, passing about and taking their rest, and all was entirely without apprehension of danger from Indians or any other foe. As the Indians left the garrison without doing any mischief, most of us supposed that no evil was meditated by them. But there was one man who acted on the supposition that there was always danger surrounding a garrison when visited by Indians. That man was Sergeant Jones. From the time he took his position at the gun, he never left it, but acted as he had said he believed it best to do. That was to be always ready. He not only remained at the gun himself, but retained 2 other men, whom he had previously trained as assistants to work the piece. Shortly before dark, without disclosing his intentions, Sergeant Jones said to his wife, "I have a little business to attend to tonight. At bedtime I wish you to retire, and not to wait for me." As he had frequently done this before to discharge some official duty at the quartermaster's office, she thought it not singular, but did as he had requested, and retired at the usual hour. On awaking in the morning, however, she was surprised at finding that he was still not there. In truth, this faithful soldier had stood by his gun throughout the entire night, ready to fire if occasion required, at any moment during that time, nor could he be persuaded to leave that gun until all this party of Indians had entirely disappeared from the vicinity of the garrison. Some 2 weeks after this time, those same Indians with others attacked Fort Ridgely, and after some 10 days' siege, the garrison was relieved by the arrival of soldiers under Colonel H. Sibley. The second day after Colonel Sibley arrived, a man approached who resided at the lower agency, a Frenchman of pure or mixed blood, whose name cannot now be disclosed. He appeared before Sergeant Jones in a very agitated manner, and intimated that he had some disclosures to make to him. But no sooner had he made this intimation than he became extremely and violently agitated, and seemed to be in a perfect agony of mental perturbation. Sergeant Jones said to him, "If you have anything to disclose, you ought to at once, to make it known." This man repeated that he had disclosures to make, but that he did not dare to make them, and although Sergeant Jones urged him by every consideration in his power to tell what he knew, the man seemed to be so completely under the dominion of terror that he was unable to divulge the great secret. "Why," said he, "they will kill me! They will kill me, sir! They will kill my wife and children!" Saying which, he turned and walked away. Shortly after the first interview, this troubled man returned to Sergeant Jones, when again the sergeant urged him to disclose what he knew, and promised him that if he would do so, that he, Jones, would keep his, the Frenchman's name, a profound secret forever, that if the information which he should disclose should lead to the detection and punishment of the guilty, the name of the informant should never be made known. Being thus assured, the Frenchman soon became more calm. Hesitating a moment, he inquired of Sergeant Jones if he remembered that some 2 weeks ago a party of Indians came down to the fort to have a dance. Sergeant Jones replied that he did. "Why," said the Frenchman, "did you know that these Indians were all warriors of Little Crow or some of the other lower bands? Sir, these Indians had all been selected for the purpose and came down to Fort Ridgely by the express command of Little Crow and the other chiefs to get permission to dance, and when all suspicion should be completely lulled, in the midst of the dance, to seize their weapons, kill every person in the fort, then to seize the big guns, open the magazine, and secure the ammunition, when they should be joined by all the remaining warriors of the lower bands. Thus armed and increased by numbers, they were to proceed together down the valley of the Minnesota. With this force and these weapons, they were assured they could drive every white man beyond the Mississippi." All this, the Frenchman informed Sergeant Jones, he had learned by being present at a council, and from conversation had with other Indians, who had told him that they had gone to the garrison for that very purpose. When he had concluded this revelation, Sergeant Jones inquired, "Why did they not execute their purpose? Why did they not take the fort?" The Frenchman replied, "Because they saw during all their dance and their stay at the fort that big gun constantly pointed at them." At other conversations, both then and afterward, the Frenchman made other disclosures implicating individuals by name as participating in that council, which it is not proper now to relate. Interpreter Quinn, now dead, told the narrator of the foregoing incidents that Little Crow had said, repeatedly in their councils, that the Indians could kill all the white men in the Minnesota Valley. "In this way," said he, "we can get all our lands back, that the whites would want these lands, and that in this way they could get double annuities." Some of the councils at which these suggestions of Little Crow were made dated, he said, as far back as the summer of 1857, immediately after the Inkpaduda War. On the 15th of August, 3 days before the outbreak, a half-breed Sioux informed William Mills that he had just returned from a war council held with about 140 Sioux, and that the Indians were going to kill off the whites, particularly the traders. "But," said he, "they will not kill you." Seeing the half-breed was somewhat intoxicated, Mr. Mills paid little or no attention to the information thus obtained. On the 17th day of August, 1862, Little Crow, Inkpaduda, and Little Priest, the latter one of the Winnebago chiefs, attended church at the lower agency, and seemed to listen attentively to the services conducted by the Reverend J.D. Hinman. On the afternoon of that day, Little Crow invited these Indians to his house, a short distance above the agency. On the same day, an Indian council was held at Rice Creek, 16 miles above the lower agency, attended by the Soldiers' Lodge. Inkpaduda, it is believed, and Little Priest, with some 13 Winnebago warriors, attended this council. Why this council was held, and what its objects, can easily be imagined. The decrees of the one held 2 weeks before had not been executed. The reason why the fort was not taken has been narrated. The other part of the same scheme, the taking of the agency at Yellow Medicine, on the same day the fort was to have fallen, will be alluded to in another chapter. It then became necessary for the conspirators to hold another council to devise new plans for the execution of their nefarious designs upon the whites. The plan determined upon is easily traced in the streams of human blood that on the very next day issued from every settlement within a radius of some 30 miles from the place where it convened. The Acton tragedy, 40 miles distant, had taken place but a few hours before this council was convened. But one other fact will forever settle this matter. On Monday the 18th of August, these Acton murderers were seen at the mill on Crow River, 6 miles from Hutchinson, with a team taken from Acton, so that these Indians did not go to the lower agency, but remained in the country about Hutchinson. One of the number only returned to the agency by the next morning. All that followed in the bloody drama originated at this council of death, over which Little Crow presided on Sunday afternoon, the 17th day of August, 1862. The general massacre of all white men was, by order of this council, to commence at the agency on the morning of the 18th, and at as many other points simultaneously as could be reached by the dawn of day, radiating from that point as a center. The advantage gained by the suddenness of the attack, and the known panic that would result, was to be followed up until every settlement was massacred, Fort Ridgely taken, both agencies burned, New Ulm, Mankato, St. Peter, and all the towns on the river destroyed. The whole country plundered and devastated, and as many of the inhabitants as were left alive were to be driven beyond the Mississippi River. The decree of this savage council matured on a Christian Sabbath by civilized Indians, after attentively listening to the gospel of peace, filled the full measure of the long-cherished conspiracy now matured by Little Crow, until it was full of the most hopeful results to his polluted and brutal nature. Once an Indian, always an Indian, was here horribly demonstrated. If the reader of these pages should fail to find in these antecedents of the Great Massacre enough to convince him that the awful tragedy was the result of a deep-laid conspiracy, then the facts as here presented will have failed to leave the same impression upon the mind of the reader as the writer himself has received from the multiple evidences before him, unmistakably pointing to that conclusion. With these antecedents here presented, we shall hasten to conduct the reader to the more immediate scenes of the dreadful tragedy. So that's it for this episode. This is the second in our chronological series on the Sioux Massacre of 1862, from this 1864 book by Charles S. Bryant and Abel B. Murch. In this episode, we heard about how the government attempted to punish Inkpaduda for the 1857 Spirit Lake Massacre, and they got some other bands of Sioux to kill a few of Inkpaduda's band. This may have led Little Crow and others to think that they could forcibly retake their land in Minnesota without being killed, and then eventually bargain to get it back. We also heard about the conflict between the Farmer Indians and the Blanket Indians, or the conflict between the white man's agricultural civilization and the Sioux's nomadic way of life. Then we heard the heroic story of Sergeant John Jones, who continuously manned the howitzer at Fort Ridgely, and had it trained on Little Crow's band of Indians the entire time they were performing their dance just outside the fort, and all night. Sergeant Jones had also served in the Mexican-American War, where the U.S. gained Texas, California, and other western states, and he would serve in more Indian campaigns in Minnesota under General Sibley in 1863 and 1864. I also found this record of a John J. Jones from Cass County, Minnesota, who was in the Air Force in the 95th Bomber Group in World War II. He earned an Air Medal and a Purple Heart before going missing in action or lost at sea on December 16, 1944. I don't know if this John Jones was a descendant of the Sergeant John Jones who manned the howitzer at Fort Ridgely, but it certainly seems possible. If you have any information on a possible link between these two men named John Jones, who are both from Minnesota, and who both had distinguished military achievements, then please let us know in the comments. And stay tuned to this channel for more episodes about the Minnesota Sioux Massacre and other similar events throughout our history. This channel is called Unworthy History because we cover actual history that has been cast aside as unworthy to discuss on history channels on TV. Here on this channel we keep this worthy history of our ancestors alive by reading directly from old books. If you'd like to support our channel, then you can join our Patreon page or become a YouTube channel member. Members will have full access to all of our members-only videos, and your contribution towards keeping actual history alive will be recognized at the end of each episode. So if you want to see more episodes like this, then be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Unworthy History.